Welcome, everybody, to the Breaking Badness podcast. I am Callie Fencl, and with me is Ian Campbell. And we are joined today by Tricia Howard of Akamai. Welcome, everybody.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Good afternoon.
Ian, this is, I think, is your first video podcast. We recently moved to video podcasting, so this is exciting. But I love Tricia's green background. I love your shirt contrast against it. Very cool. Lots of pop elements to it.
Thanks. I got to make up for the fact that my hair matches my background, which, considering this is a built-in green screen, it's sometimes my head disappears.
I've got to say, I was on LinkedIn looking at older posts, and I saw you reference your hair at one point as going vivid. I went vivid, didn't look back. Just the coolest phrase.
I like that.
Yeah, thank you. That's what they're called, like in the hair world. It's you have your vivid, so it's the non-natural colors. So yeah, that it also is a really good metaphor for how changing your hair that drastically when you have a personality like mine certainly does. My whole personality got a lot more vivid too.
Cool. Yeah, we're gonna talk about it. But first, we talked about your hair, but can you tell us a little bit about your background in InfoSec?
Oh, sure. I got into security by accident for certain. I have a theater background. My degree's in theater arts, and TLDR, I was supposed to go get my master's or my MFA in lighting design. That didn't happen. And I moved up halfway across the country by myself to a VAR, a value-added reseller, and learned tech through them, found security. And I found that I started my career in sales, cold calling, smiling, dialing, and moved my way up through into content creation, which is where I sit now. And I found cybersecurity as part of that whole integrator world. And it really struck me equally to the way that theater struck me whenever I first became aware of it. And it was because I believe that the defenders today are the closest thing we're going to get to real life superheroes. The more that our lives become online and the more digitally integrated we become, the more important and more like real life superheroes these people are. And it just fascinated me that there was a way that I could get paid to feel like I was in a Marvel movie. What? That's how I got it there. I started creating content because I realized that the techies speak in ones and zeros, and I lend more towards speaking in unicorns. And I've found that I was understanding things a little differently than they were being portrayed elsewhere. And I thought maybe other people would too. And so I started writing, and now I have made my way into a niche part, which is cybersecurity research. And that's what I focus on now, which is editorial and marketing, effectively, cybersecurity research for Akamai.
Very cool. Oh my gosh. I love that. And the reason that we wanted to reach out to you and bring you on the podcast was a specific blog post, which was battling the emotional toxicity within games, how to digitally thrive. And of course, Ian, jump in whenever you see fit. But, talking about feeling like a superhero, is that really what got you interested in gaming as well? Is because you could be a superhero in that realm too?
Oh, that's a great question. So I've been into games ever since I was a kid, back in the Game Boy Color days and all that. I still have my Nintendo 64, by the way. But I moved more into like mobile gaming for a while. And what's funny is I never considered myself a gamer because I wasn't into first-person shooters. I wasn't into the Skyrims, the big open world stuff. I liked a lot more of the linear games. So I never really considered myself a gamer until my current partner, who got me more into the PC, like the PC gaming realm. And now I would say I'm definitely into it that way, but it was more just curiosity. I liked to play with stuff. I liked to see how these little pictures can turn into other new pictures, and it's just cool.
That is really, yeah, I can see that. That's interesting though. You didn't consider yourself a gamer. I guess I wouldn't either, because the games I like seem to be like cozy games.
Yeah,
I'm worried. I'm worried the other gamers are going to be like, that's not a game. That's
yeah, there is
as
some
the
of
other
that.
sort of gamer. I welcome you both. No, it's all valid. It's all valid, and it's all creative play. And for me, it's all partly putting things together. My initial gaming experiences were the original DOS game, Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego?
Yes.
And I didn't put together till just last year. That is what spawned my love of threat hunting. It was wild.
Oh, that's a beautiful story.
Oh, Tricia, you even wrote a piece about that. We'll have to send that to you after
Yeah.
we record because it was really good. But yeah, talking about like how we feel about perception around gaming. I'm not a real gamer if I'm not doing first person shooter. I'm doing cozy games. Is that sort of contributing to the mental distress in the gaming community? Let's get into that a bit.
Sure. So I would say there is some level of gatekeeping, or I guess gamekeeping, if we want to, within the community. But I do think we've opened that up quite a bit. Places like Reddit and even Steam, the Steam community in its own is so large, and you can find your tribe, so to speak. You can find your place. And so I do think we've come a long way toward that. I think actually a lot of the mental stress and strain that comes into games is a lot more underneath even things that we would know. It goes so deep that we don't even know what to look for, and it starts with our brains. It starts with our brains. A lot of us are really just not aware that our brains maybe are wired in ways that are not helpful to not only ourselves but to the people around us. And when you think about why people game, we do it to have fun. We do it to escape. And especially whenever tensions are high and stress is high, what do we want to do? We want to go game. We want to get away. And if you're trying to escape and going in somewhere that already is, it could be, depending on what type of gamer you are, lending towards violence or opposition in general, it's going to come out a lot more toxic and a lot more hateful than it would if you were sitting next to somebody right in front. So it's a lot easier to be not on camera, just playing your game and screaming at somebody that you considered an idiot because they missed a drop or something. I would say a lot of it is more a lack of awareness that there is even something wrong. And how can you fix something that you can't see? We talk about this in security all the time. And I even put that in the blog, like, you can't secure what you can't see includes your mind. We got to start there. That's the only way we're going to fix the problem.
Can you tell us a little bit about your own journey regarding navigating mental health?
Yeah, sure. It sucked. I'm not gonna lie. We like to talk about things in a way that I call social media authenticity, which is we come back after we go through the vulnerable part completely in silence. And then we come back when we've emerged and we have all of these lessons learned. And wow, suddenly, wow, it was a really rough 8 months, but I came out so much better. And this is how you can apply it to B2B sales. And it's so my journey, and I also did that. I did that too. I went down and disappeared for a long time. And then I came back and I started speaking out. I would say probably around the point when I was like 85% there, and then was a little bit more honest for the last 15%. But I want to make it very clear what I am suggesting, what I'm talking about, and what I talk about in this blog. It is hard. This is not something that happens overnight. My journey started 3 years ago, is when I found out for the first time ever in my life that I was an abused kid. And coming to, because when you are raised a certain way, you think it's just normal. It's how it is. And when I got into my new relationship and I started realizing that I was showing up the same way in this one that I was in the one before, and they are very different people. So that meant that the issue was with me. And so I went and sought help, and I had no idea what I was getting into, truly no idea. And throughout the process, and truly an open mind, I've managed to learn that there were a lot of things that I thought were true that were actually not true. And that was what was making me sick. So effectively, what was happening was a runtime error. My brain recognized, yo, there's something here that really doesn't make any sense, but we don't really know what else would make sense. So let's just try and work around it. And I built all of these walls and all of these masks and all of these, insert whatever other buzzword here about mental health, to cope. And once those answers, once that patch was issued, a lot was easier. And I kept my job throughout this. I didn't take any time on leave. And I will tell you, if you are deciding to go through something like this, please go on leave, please. It is not for the faint of heart to try and keep your own job on top of doing all of this. Long story, still long. That was my journey. And I realized that because I did keep my job through it, a lot of people suffer and you don't know. You have no idea what is going on. All you know is you see them on a call and maybe they're a little sad, or maybe they didn't come on camera that day. And we need to be talking about this stuff in a workplace. Like games, of course, definitely, but if it's happening in games, it's going to happen in work too. And we need to be having these types of conversations. So that was a little bit of my story, and then what led to the games blog.
Yeah,
So let me ask a quick.
Yeah,
Let me ask a
for it.
quick follow-up there. If obviously, especially in security, we deal with stigma so much, especially around stuff like psychotherapy. I'm a huge proponent of psychotherapy. I go every month, and I post about it everywhere, month, just so people see it. If there's someone sitting out there listening who's thinking things aren't right for me, but I'm not to the point where I want to seek therapy yet, or they're trying to talk themselves out of it, what would you say to them?
I would say, I get it. I understand. I get it. You're never going to know if it's worth it unless you try, but make sure that you're ready, because don't go for anybody else. Go for you. It will not work. You'll end up spending a lot of money and end up with the same results and a negative view of what therapy is. If you're thinking about doing it, go forward if you're ready. Don't let anybody tell you what to do with your own mental health journey, because it will not stick unless you're ready.
I think a follow-up to that, to what you had said too, Tricia, in terms of taking a leave and then the stigma element that Ian mentioned. I know you didn't take leave. Had you taken leave, do you felt like there would have been a stigma at work, or how would you have gone about taking a leave without feeling the company like coming back? Maybe they think I can't handle this anymore.
That's why I didn't go on leave. I was truly afraid, and I didn't know the process, and I didn't feel comfortable enough because of what was going on in here to learn about the process of what leave meant, not only within the company, within Akamai, but just in general. What does that actually mean? What are the implications? What are the protections? What are not? And I would say the stigma is going to be there, but you don't have to tell them. No, you don't have to tell anybody. It is none of their business why you are gone. As far as they're all they need to know is whatever HR needs paperwork wise, but your immediate boss doesn't even have to know. Take some time and learn what the process is. If your company has internal documentation on what leave is, do some research on just the laws in general. I think that would help dispel some of the concern. But yeah, that's exactly why I didn't take it. And to Akamai's credit, I did end up taking 2 weeks off of just PTO. And it was the first time I'd ever taken off more than 7 days. Oh my goodness, 2 weeks. And it was just night and day. I actually got to rest. I actually got to chill. I got to deal with the burnout that had been coming from not only working myself to death in my 20s because of what was wrong, but also figuring out what was wrong and dealing with that. And it was a really wonderful 2 weeks. And when I came back, oh man, I am so grateful to this company for this. When I came back, they met me with, holy cow, Tricia, we had no idea how much you were doing. You need help. We need to get you some. And that was wonderful. They could have reacted very differently than that, but they showed up in a really supportive way. So don't be afraid to seek out the information.
That's fair. Yeah, talking about how you were dealing with burnout, you took the 2 weeks off, but like when you're not taking time off, how do you deal with burnout? Like when you still have to show up every day, but vacation isn't inevitably around the corner for a little while. What do you do?
Yeah, so this is where your team dynamic and your relationship with your immediate supervisor is important, at least from my perspective. I was very honest. I was just got to a point where I really couldn't hide it anymore. And I was showing up poorly as a result of that. And so I addressed it with my manager in that way, which is, yo, I don't know what's going on, but I know that I am missing things and I am not showing up 100% in meetings, and there's something wrong. And that helped a lot, if for no other reason than to know that somebody else knew. I wasn't just sitting there by myself in this misery cloud. Somebody else knew what was going on. And as a result, make an action plan from there. Finding little things throughout your day that are not work related, especially if you work from home, are really helpful. Pop open a Tetris game in the middle of work if you have 5 minutes in between meetings. Find something that you can do relatively locally that gives your brain dopamine, because that's what it's missing. It wants that. So give it that.
What would you say the catalyst was to write this blog post? Like, was there like a specific thing where you're just like, you know what, I got to do this. I got to put this out there in the world. And right before we started recording, you said, this is going on Akamai's blog or it's going on my blog, but it's got to be out there.
Yes.
So what made you want to do that?
Yeah, sure. The whole reason this thing even started was was working on a 3-part series about security in games. And the first one was based on Akamai's data that we pulled for our State of the Internet reports. And it was like looking at the different attack vectors that were happening within games, and especially bots was really interesting. But then we needed a second one. And what I pitched to everybody was, all right, so we have this overall security version of games, but what we're missing in the market is a gamer's perspective on what this looks like. So, and I happen to be one. Can I take this? And I had a whole other draft. What you saw is a rip and replace. I had an entire, it was copy edited, it was legal approved, it was ready to go. And I sent it to Dr. Vol, who was such a wonderful resource for me in this. And she was like, oh, by the way, I think this and this could be edited. And she gave me a little bit more context. I pulled the entire thing and said, we're not doing it. And I did a full rewrite. And it was all based on when she had responded really thoughtfully in an email of why she gave the feedback that she gave. And it was all about finding a place within a space and how these spaces are digitally created. There's not a whole lot of, or there's no organic or RNG in a game. Everything is created, and how that affects. And I was blown away at the parallels between what I had been going through in my own journey. And I thought, no wonder we have such a toxic thing. Half the world are gamers. And if a very conservative estimate says 1 in 7 children are a lot like me, no wonder we have all of this stuff. And so I thought it was really important. And I think we have to have these conversations, even as hard as they are, in these type of forums. And yeah, so I told Akamai, I said, this is going to go out one way or another. It's going to go out either on Akamai's blog or on mine. And they were wonderful and said, yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. Let's try it.
That's great. Have they been proponents of healthy mental health?
Yeah. Yes. I would say so. Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
How did it feel to put it out? Because it's a big place of vulnerability, which is obviously a loaded word in our profession.
It felt like one of the biggest reliefs I think I've ever had when I made the joke about the patch being issued. And it literally physically felt like my brain snapped into place. And I know that I would not believe that if I had not personally experienced it, but I like physically felt my brain like snap whenever I got this one particular question to fix the runtime error. And so immediately, or not immediately, but pretty soon after that is when I put out my first like really vulnerable post on LinkedIn about it. And the overwhelming support was overwhelming. And I thought, all right, it's time. And so, yeah, it was a big relief. And also I was really scared. It's hard to look your legal person in the eye that has just read about your abuse. It's weird. It's hard, but it was necessary, and we got to talk about it. So it felt good overall. It's a net positive.
Yeah. Just to piggyback off that, like what you received when you did your more vulnerable LinkedIn post and sharing this blog post, was it very similar reactions, like very supportive, or how would you describe it?
Yes. Oh, Ian, for one, was very, yeah, there was definitely a lot of support. In fact, one of my friends, I was actually excited to share this one with my friends who are not necessarily security people, because a lot of the stuff I work on is like half of its code. So, yeah, but I was really excited. And one of them happened to be like a neuropsych major. And she was like, oh man, this makes me want to crack open my neuropsych book. And that I took as the biggest of wins. So yeah, definitely a lot of support, a lot of just kindness. Really like putting something out like this. It can invite in the worst kinds of people, but it also really attracts the best.
Oh, for sure. Earlier, you had mentioned that you reached out to Dr. Kimberly Vol.
Yeah.
Who is she? What is her expertise and research focus for
Yes.
people that might not know?
Oh, yeah. So Dr. Kimberly Vol has a PhD in AI and ML. She focused on computer science and AI, and she has been in game development for a long time. And what she was put her on the map, at least for me, was in 2017. She led the team who reimagined the entire League of Legends Honor update, which you can't spell toxicity in games without League. So if there was nobody better to talk to about than her. And She has done some really, I highly recommend looking her up. She is also the co-founder of what is now Thriving in Games, which is formerly the Fair Play Alliance. And it is an organization that is dedicated to fighting the toxicity in games by using psychology and AI and how humans actually function to make this happen. And it was wildly successful. The 2017 update, it changed a lot. My partner alone, this is the level of toxic that League gets to. My partner, when I first met him, was like, don't ever let me play League. Don't ever let me play League. If I tell you that I want to play League, please just unplug my computer. It turns me into a person I don't like. And that's a common thought process. So she did a lot, and I fangirled so hard when I talked to her. I forgot most of my questions.
Yeah, but she had mentioned too, and I think you cited this in the blog post, that there's no delineation anymore between digital and IRL in real life. Can you summarize what that means? And I think you get to that a little bit when you say, if we're focusing on toxicity in games, we have to think about it at work as well. So it's just like, that seems, yeah, there is no delineation anymore. So maybe can you expand on that a bit?
Oh yeah, because this was one of the points that made me do a rewrite. She posited that us creating a separation between physical spaces and digital spaces, i.e. games, is actually causing a lot of underlying categorization that makes it seem like these digital spaces are less legitimate. And in turn, that means that we start treating our kids who are into them like they are doing something that isn't worthwhile. We start really demeaning the value of these spaces. And what she was saying is, this is where people hang out now. This is the new bar, so to speak. Like, you go to, it's not an arcade. You all hop on and play Rainbow Six. That's what you do now. So what she was saying is, we need to stop separating them and actually look at them as a cohesive unit. And the example that she gave, which I thought was brilliant, is with the same care as we would a community installing a local park. Of course, we should be spending that time. If this is where humans are hanging out, then let's focus there. Stop trying to pull them away from it, work with it, and work with it in a way that we actually work. And so that's where she was getting. It fascinated me. The thought of, yeah, it made sense once you think about it, but it was like, oh yeah, we shouldn't be considering these differently. I work remotely. This is my office. This is it. Yeah, you're right. And it does. It gives you a little bit more of a legitimacy. And there's so much stigma also about kids playing games and with parents that don't necessarily understand it. And yeah, let's just let them be.
How do you go about treating it like building a park when there are maybe a wide range of people playing a game at the same time, like maybe like a 15-year-old and somebody middle-aged and a kid? Like, it's all these different people from different backgrounds, like maybe different thought beliefs. How do you build a park when it's so vast like that?
And that's where like content moderation comes in, and community management, and all of those things, similar to how we have a Parks and Rec department. Or the onus comes down to those people, those of us who are building and securing these digital spaces, and not just games. This includes these platforms that we're talking about right now. It really falls onto them. And my goodness, what a role they have, I must say. It has to be an understanding, a true understanding of what people are doing there, what people want to get out of the game, what they want to do in that space, and moreover, what people are capable of doing and what they are not capable of doing within these spaces. And just being honest and realistic about it, I think, is a really great first step.
Ian, I know you had a question about transactionality that I want you to be able to ask. I don't want to do it for you.
Your points about transactionality in the blog post feel incredibly salient to security and security operations, especially. I'm a security operations guy, along with the difference between us versus them and us versus the challenge. Have you worked on applying that to your security environment? And if so, how has it gone?
Sure. So I personally have not applied it to a security environment, but I certainly have talked about it ad nauseum with other people securing environments. I would say thank you first off that saying that they're salient. I think the transactionality is was one of the big aha moments here. So if you haven't read the blog, you're not familiar with the idea of looking at relationships as transactions. This is a trap that a lot of us get into unknowingly. We go into an interaction with another human being, and we give them something, and we look at that expenditure of energy as a cost, and we give that to them. And if they are not giving us that back, then suddenly this is not equal anymore. We are now at a transactional level. And that's not how things go. What that ends up doing is causing a categorization in our brains that, hey, this person didn't do what they said they were going to do. I am now putting in more. They are taking from me. And now we're not two people. We are two people in a bidding war. And that's just doesn't really work in an emotional perspective. When it comes to security, I think we love to generalize the idea of an end user or like marketing, or like we like to put these little labels on them, and we need them. We need the users, we need the marketers, we need these other people. So rather than looking at it as a, oh man, it's us versus them, we can't do it, looking at it as more of a team mentality. We're all on the same team. We all have our own strengths. We all have our own weaknesses. That is why we collaborate, because we are not intended to be a one-person machine. Despite what your boards and budgets may tell you, security people, you should have a whole team of collaborators. These small staffs of IT just make me so sad, especially in security. Yeah, so just as opposed to, oh yes, there was a wonderful concept that a Reddit user had put on there that I found as part of my research, which was rather than looking at it as us versus them, it's us versus the challenge. So it's not, we need to make person X stop clicking on emails. It's, we need to find a way to keep our organization safe from ransomware. And that immediately, even I physically felt it. Like the first one felt really tense to even say. And the second one is like a conversation. What a concept. It's almost like science has been telling us since 2017 that collaboration works better than one person to solve a complex problem.
How does that work, do you think, in more of the remote setting? I'm sure you're remote, right?
Oh, I am, yeah.
Yeah. In terms of the risk of being siloed, being in the remote setting and feeling like it is just me and it's easier if I just do it in a work setting, like how do you combat that?
Oh, yeah. And that's so hard, especially when you're remote and you already have a small team and it's already challenging to get people on because they're overworked and it is hard. I would say, again, treating it as if you were going into the office has helped me a lot. So rather than viewing it as I'll set up little meetings with my coworkers and just, we will body double and we will work on a specific thing. And so like the meeting invite will be like, work on this bill of materials with this person, and we just sit on there, and if we need questions we ask them, and we work, kind of simulating a water cooler environment. It's find people who work like you, because they do exist, and work to work with them the way that you would like to work. And that's super like kludgy, but I hope that made sense. Some people like to body double, some people don't. Some people like to work on meetings, some people don't. Just asking that question and kind of finding people who work in the same way as you are, it can help foster that collaboration that you would be forced into in the office. The only caution there is you don't want to get into a silo where you're only in what's that word? Echo chamber about certain things. That is something that the IRL world provides us just naturally. We're forced to be around people with different thoughts, feelings, and hair color as we are. You don't necessarily have to do that in these spaces. In fact, we move away from that. We move into these echo chambers, bringing that into work too, finding people that maybe you had a call on and you liked a comment, or they had a question that you thought was really good. Tell them. Start that conversation, because we're really good at telling people what they're bad at, but we're not super great at telling people that they're good at something, and moreover that we appreciate that they are good at something.
I'll also enthusiastically second body doubling. It's amazing how effective it can be in the right environment.
Yeah, definitely. With the proper boundaries, like set it up, because if you get it with your buddy, then it's very easy to just sit there and talk for 30 minutes, which if that's the way it works, fine, then just set the call for an hour and a half.
I've never tried that before, but I feel like I should. I think I'd like it.
It's a nice accountability tool.
Coming back to the different age levels of people, I know in the conclusion you talk about the mental health crisis in games is discussed at all ages, but I'm concerned about the youngest players that might not have the vocabulary of what's going on, like with their own mental health and how they're feeling when they're playing games or reacting to things that other people might say. What would you say about that age bracket of people? Like or what would Kimberly Bowles say about how they can navigate those waters?
Yeah. So first and foremost is showing interest in your child and what they are interested in is pretty much a net positive. So I do think this falls a little bit on the parents. I know, especially when we're talking into the teen years, it gets weird, like wishy-washy from what I understand. But kids follow the examples that they see. They're going to follow the examples that they see by their parents. They're going to follow the examples by their teachers. They're going to follow examples that they see by leaders. So we can start that by doing it in front of them. So if you're feeling that, half the problem is just finding the words. You said that, like just finding the words to your emotions. I struggle with this all the time. Like I feel this icky way, and then my eyes start to narrow, my pupils, I start to get into this little, and then it's, wait a minute, hold on. What has happened? I'm actually just upset because my soda stream is almost out of its canister and I had to push it twice. Calm down. Let those kids see that. Let people at work see your vulnerability because they might be recognizing something that their kids are doing, and be more open about it. I think there's a lot of shame around games and around, in particular from parents, shame that their kids are gaming. And I'm like, yo, what? Your kid is ranked in Fortnite? You should be screaming that from the rafters. Do you have any idea what that means? But they don't. They don't necessarily understand. And to your point, the kids don't have the words for it. All they know is my parents are trying to get me to go do this thing that I don't care about again. I don't care for. And then it causes even more of a rift. And we need to be dispelling that. We need to be encouraging an environment that they feel comfortable to come and say these things to you. I played Fortnite. Okay, so let's say you are concerned about how much time your kid is spending on a screen. Rather than taking the screen away and chastising them and telling them that they should go outside, go talk to them and say, hey, I noticed you've spent a lot of time on your iPad today. I've noticed that or this week. I've noticed, not today, because that's like really too small of a time frame. But I noticed that you were a little quiet this week. I noticed that you were maybe leaning a little bit towards your games. What's going on? How are you feeling? Can you even tell me what you feel? Start there, because they may not. And kids are so perceptive, but they don't necessarily have the words and the vocabulary that we do. So offering it to them is a nice way to start showing them that they don't have to hide their passion, because it might be from their parents. That's a really lonely feeling, that the people or person, whatever your situation is growing up, that your caregivers are supposed to love you regardless, unconditionally, doesn't matter what you do. And not only not showing an interest, but tearing an interest of theirs down is only it's a net negative. It's not going to get you what you want as a parent, and it's certainly not going to help the child. So that's a really long-winded answer that kind of talked around it, but I think it's difficult to put that onus on the kids in my mind, because they don't know any better. Especially if we don't know any better, how are they going to know?
Oh, absolutely. I would agree with that. I don't have any children of my own, so I don't have, but I'm like, I can imagine this is how I might handle it if I did.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Before we wrap up, Tricia, or first, Ian, is there anything else you'd like to ask before we wrap up? Or
no, I think it's been a great conversation. I'm just really grateful to Tricia, both for the fantastic post and the space that it holds for further conversation, and to push it forward and to maybe help more people as it goes on. So thank you, Tricia. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And thank you all for having me on here to talk about it. You're doing the same thing, getting it out there, and I really appreciate it. I'm trying not to get emotional.
Of course. Before we leave today, are there any communities or online gaming communities that you would recommend that have been incredibly supportive, have helped your mental health, or are working toward improving themselves? Like anything that you would want to leave our listeners with?
First off, I would say Reedy and stuff, number one. Secondly, I feel like a broken record a little bit, but thriving in games is where I would start. Whether you are a gamer or a company who works with games or a developer yourself, there are so many wonderful resources, a framework even of how to safely build a community. And it's very handy and very helpful. So I would start there for sure. And then be the change that you want to see. Make the community that you are a part of what you want to be, because that's really where we're going. Everything is community driven. The devs truly can only do so much. It's up to us. And if those of us who are members of the community. So be the change you want to see.
That's great. Thank you so much, Tricia. Again, thank you for writing this blog. We're so excited to discuss it with you today. Where can people find you if they wanted to talk with you?
Yeah. So LinkedIn is probably the easiest place to find me. It's LinkedIn/n/Tricia Kicks SAS. That's SS. You can find me there and all of the research and stuff I post there. So it's the easiest place.
Excellent. Perfect. Thank you so much for joining us today, Ian. Thank you for joining me as a co-host. We really appreciate it. All right.
Thank you for
so
having me.
Of course. And thank you to our listeners for being here. And we hope to catch you again next week for an all-new episode of Breaking Badness. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
That's about all we have for this week. You can find us on Twitter @DomainTools. All of the articles mentioned today will be included in our blog post, which can be found at blog.domaintools.com. Catch us every Wednesday at 9 a.m. Pacific Time when we publish our podcast and blog. That's it for this week. We'll see you again next week on another episode of Breaking Badness. Until then, remember, don't drink and click.